Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, listen to me closely. There is only one who holds the power of eternity in his hands, one who existed before time began and will exist after the last star burns out. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the Creator who spoke the universe into existence with nothing but His Word. He is not bound by time, space, or circumstance. He does not need permission. He does not ask for validation. He does not negotiate with fear, and he does not tremble before power. He is power. Before time began, before light pierced the void, before the earth had shape or form, there was only one presence, God. Not a force, not an energy, not a cosmic accident, but a conscious, eternal being who existed outside the bounds of time and space. He is not becoming, he is. He is not evolving, he is unchanging, he is not created. He is the Creator. Every beginning begins with him, and every end concludes under his authority. To understand life, purpose, and power, we must start with this absolute truth: the eternal being is only God. He is not confined to moments. He does not age. He does not decay. There was never a time he was not, and there will never be a time he ceases to be. The stars were hung in the sky by his hands, and yet the heavens cannot contain him. We live in minutes and hours, chasing calendars and deadlines, but God dwells in the eternal now. He sees the end from the beginning and orchestrates eternity without ever being rushed. The laws of physics, the bounds of gravity, and the dimensions of the universe bow before him, not the other way around. Everything we know and everything we can imagine flows from him. All wisdom, all power, all authority originates in his essence. He does not learn because there is nothing he does not already know. He does not sleep because he never tires. He does not need because he is self-sufficient. We must breathe to survive. He breathed and life came to be. We must eat, rest, grow. He simply is, and in that lies the foundation of all security, all identity, all strength. When we look around at the world, we are often tempted to exalt the wrong things. People chase fame, worship wealth, and fear human power. Kings have reigned, empires have risen, but all have fallen. Technology advances, societies evolve, but the core truth remains unshaken. Only God is eternal. Governments crumble, ideologies fade, even the strongest bodies weaken, but the throne of God remains unshakable, untouched, undiminished. This understanding should reset our entire perspective. When you recognize that only God is eternal, everything else shrinks in comparison. Your challenges, no matter how large they seem, are temporary. Your enemies, no matter how powerful they appear, are dust in the wind. Your fears, no matter how loud they scream, are silenced in the face of divine permanence. Because when the Eternal speaks, everything else must be still. God's eternality means his promises don't expire. His words don't return void. His plans are not shaken by human opposition. When he says, "I am with you," he means it not just in one moment, but in every moment, forever. We serve a God who does not change his mind like man, who does not waver with mood, who does not lie or forget. What he began in you, he is able to complete, not because of your strength, but because of his timeless faithfulness. This is the kind of God we serve, not an idea, not a cultural symbol, not a powerless idol made by human hands, but a living, breathing, speaking, reigning, eternal being who holds the universe together by the word of his power. The one who spoke light into darkness and order into chaos is the same one who speaks peace into your soul. So when you walk through life, when you're faced with anxiety, threats, confusion, or pain, remember this: nothing you face is greater than the one who stands above it all. Everything that terrifies you today will pass. Everything that tries to stop you will fade, but God remains, and if he remains, you will too, because you're held not by your own strength, but by the hands of the Eternal. Fear is a spirit. It doesn't come from God, and it doesn't belong in the heart of someone who walks with him. Fear is subtle. It disguises itself as caution, hesitation, overthinking, even humility. But make no mistake, fear is not harmless. It is a thief. It steals peace, paralyzes purpose, and delays destiny. And while the world teaches us to manage fear, God calls us to replace it with faith. Faith and fear cannot coexist in the same heart at full strength. One will always dominate the other. You feed fear by focusing on limitations, threats, and the opinions of others, but you feed faith by focusing on the character of God, His power, His promises, and His presence. Faith is not naive optimism. It's not blind hope. Faith is rooted in truth that God is who He says He is, and He will do what He said He would do. When fear creeps in, it often sounds rational. What if I fail? What if they laugh? What if I lose everything? But faith responds with truth. If God is for me, who can be against me? The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Faith doesn't deny reality. It simply refuses to give fear the final word. And here's the truth. The enemy uses fear because he cannot stop what God has ordained. So instead of trying to shut down your calling, he tries to shut down your confidence. He whispers lies, inflates threats, and magnifies your weaknesses. But when you understand who God is, when you truly believe He is eternal, sovereign, and all-powerful, fear loses its grip. Because how can you be intimidated by what is temporary when you are backed by the eternal? Fear tells you to play small. Faith tells you to step up. Fear tells you to wait until you're ready. Faith says move because God is ready. Fear wants you to survive. Faith empowers you to thrive. And when you walk in faith, you don't just endure, you advance. You don't just exist, you impact. That's the difference. Fear reduces you to a version of yourself that God never intended. But faith brings out the version of you that He already sees. So how do you shift from fear to faith? You have to choose your focus. You can either fix your eyes on the storm or on the one who calms it. You can listen to the voice of fear, or you can trust the voice that spoke the world into existence. You have to feed your faith daily, with scripture, with prayer, with praise, with truth. The more you know God, the less power fear will have, because the more you trust His character, the less you'll doubt His control. And let's be clear. Faith does not mean you won't feel fear. It means you won't bow to it. It means you move forward in obedience even when your knees shake. It means you step out even when you don't have all the answers. Faith is not the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear make the decision. It's choosing to walk in alignment with God even when your emotions are screaming otherwise. That's what separates those who merely talk about faith from those who live by it. It's not about feelings, it's about decisions. Every time you act in faith, you push fear further out of your life. Every time you declare truth over lies, you reclaim ground the enemy tried to steal. You begin to walk with boldness, not arrogance, not pride, but boldness that comes from knowing the one who walks with you cannot be defeated. So choose faith not once, not twice, but daily, because every day that you wake up, fear will try to rise. But your job is to remind it that it no longer reigns, God reigns, and when He reigns in your life, fear doesn't stand a chance. When you fear anyone more than God, you're not just insecure, you're misaligned. You're placing more weight on human power than divine authority, and that is dangerous, because the fear of man is not just an emotional weakness, it's a spiritual distortion. It's the quiet surrender of your identity, your calling, and your integrity at the altar of human opinion. The moment you start adjusting your convictions to be accepted by people, you've already made someone else your God. The fear of man can wear many masks. It shows up as people, pleasing, as silence when you should speak, as compromise when you should stand. It's that internal pressure to be liked, to be safe, to avoid conflict. Even if it means disobeying God's voice. But God never asked you to be popular. He called you to be faithful, and there is a cost to faithfulness. There will be moments when obedience isolates you, when your yes to God is a no to everyone else. But let me tell you something. Rejection from man is a small price to pay for the approval of God. When you fear people, you shrink. You second guess, you hesitate, you hide. Why? Because you're living under the illusion that people have the final say over your future, but they don't, they can't, they didn't create you, and they can't cancel what God has appointed. Opinions are loud, but they are not sovereign. Titles may be impressive, but they are not eternal. People can criticize, but they cannot override the purposes of God. So why bow to something so temporary? The fear of man not only limits you, It controls you. It causes you to operate from a place of defense instead of destiny. You start making decisions to avoid backlash instead of pursuing purpose. You look for applause instead of alignment. And slowly, your life becomes a performance instead of a mission. But there's freedom when you fear God alone, because when your heart is anchored in Him, you stop reacting to every external voice. You move in peace. You speak with clarity. You live with courage. This isn't about arrogance or rebellion. It's about reverence. When you rightly fear God, you give Him the highest place in your life. You acknowledge that His word carries more weight than any threat, any trend, or any cultural pressure. You stand tall not because you're fearless, but because you fear the right one, the one who sees all, knows all, and judges with perfect justice, the one who can open doors no man can shut and shut doors no man can open. And here's the truth. Everyone fears something. Some people fear failure, others fear success. Some fear rejection, criticism, or obscurity, but when you fear God, those other fears lose their grip. You stop chasing validation and start walking in purpose. You stop living for approval and start living from identity. You realize that favor from man may open doors, but favor from God opens dimensions. You realize that people can applaud you one day and betray you the next, but God's loyalty never wavers. When the fear of God fills your heart, boldness fills your voice. You can confront injustice, speak truth, and walk in obedience even when it's unpopular. You can lead with conviction, not manipulation. You can serve without needing recognition. Why? Because your confidence is not rooted in the crowd, it's rooted in the Creator. And when you live like that, your life becomes a statement. I don't serve man, I serve God. So many people live trapped, not by chains, but by the fear of what people will think. But freedom begins the moment you decide that only one opinion matters. When you understand that God alone holds your future, your value, your legacy, you start to live differently. You stop bowing to systems that were never built to honor your calling. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that God called you to transform. Fear no one except Him, because the one you fear determines the one you follow. And the one you follow will determine where you go, how far you rise, and who you become. When you fear only God, you become unstoppable. Not because life gets easier, but because your spirit becomes stronger. You are no longer controlled by the shifting opinions of people or the fluctuating conditions of the world. You walk with a different posture, a different fire, a different level of clarity. There is a confidence that doesn't come from education, connections, or status. It comes from knowing exactly who holds your future. And it's not the crowd, it's not your enemies, it's not your circumstances, it's God. When you fear only God, you are no longer paralyzed by the pressure to perform. You are free from the exhausting cycle of trying to please everyone. You don't wake up wondering who approves of you. You wake up committed to pleasing the one who called you. You don't shrink back when challenged, and you don't break down when criticized. Your stability doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being anchored, anchored in truth, anchored in purpose, anchored in the unshakable presence of the Almighty. You begin to realize that opposition is not a sign of failure. It's often a sign of progress. People may come against you, but they cannot stop what God has set in motion. You stop taking attacks personally because you recognize a bigger picture. What threatens you is often threatened by the God in you. You don't need to retaliate. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to stand firm, stand faithful, stand fearless. This is where true boldness comes from, not from natural personality, not from worldly confidence, but from spiritual alignment. When your fear is rightly placed in God, there is no room left for intimidation. You're not impressed by titles, not shaken by threats, and not moved by mockery. You've already decided whose voice matters most, and that decision makes every other voice smaller. It doesn't mean the noise stops. It just means it no longer controls you. The person who fears only God becomes a force, not because they're loud, but because they're grounded, not because they're aggressive, but because they're uncompromising. You can't manipulate someone who lives for a higher authority. You can't bribe them, flatter them, or threaten them. Their loyalty is not for sale. Their integrity is not up for negotiation. Their purpose is not up for debate. They are led by conviction, not convenience, and this kind of person, this fearless, God-centered person, cannot be silenced. Their life speaks even when their mouth is closed. Their decisions carry weight. Their presence shifts atmospheres. Why? Because they live with a sense of divine assignment. They understand that they don't just exist to survive or succeed. They exist to fulfill, to build, to represent, to glorify. And when you live like that, you don't run from challenges. You confront them. You don't beg for opportunities. You create them. You don't wait for change. You become it. To fear only God is not to live recklessly. It is to live righteously. It is to choose obedience over comfort, truth over popularity, and purpose over pride. You move through life with humility, but also with authority, because you're not walking in your own name. You're walking in the name of the one who sent you. And that name has power. That name breaks chains. That name opens doors. That name covers you when everything else falls apart. People who fear God alone make history. They shift cultures. They stand firm when others fall. They love when it's hard, lead when it's costly, and serve when it's unseen. They don't flinch when storms come because they've built their foundation on something greater than comfort. They've built it on the rock. And that foundation doesn't crack under pressure. So while the world may chase approval, fear rejection, or bow to the loudest voice in the room, those who fear only God walk a different path. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Because when your fear is in the right place, your life is in the right hands, and in those hands you are truly unstoppable. There comes a point in every life where survival is no longer enough. You get tired of just getting by, tired of doing what's safe, tired of settling for less than what was promised. You start to realize that you were not created merely to exist. You were created for impact. You were not designed just to endure storms. You were built to speak to them. And the shift from survival to purpose begins the moment you choose faith over fear. Faith reclaims territory that fear tried to occupy. Fear says, stay low, keep quiet, don't try anything too big. Faith says, stand up, speak out, take the step. When you live in fear, everything feels like a risk. You wait for the perfect conditions, the perfect confirmation, the perfect timing, and all the while life passes you by. But when you walk by faith, you understand that progress doesn't require perfect conditions. It requires a made-up mind, and here's what many people don't realize. Survival is often just the visible layer of fear. It's dressed up in responsibility, logic, even false humility, but it keeps you stuck. It makes you believe that staying safe is wise, when really it's disobedience wrapped in excuses. God did not bring you through storms, valleys, heartbreak, or hardship just for you to sit in safety. He brought you through it so you could rise with a testimony, move with clarity, and live with power. When faith takes the lead, your vision changes. You stop looking at what's missing and start seeing what's possible. You stop calculating how likely something is to work and start asking what God has called you to do. You become more concerned with obedience than with outcomes, because faith isn't about guaranteed results. It's about trusting God with the results. It's not about knowing every step. It's about knowing who's leading the journey. The life of purpose doesn't wait for fear to disappear. It moves in spite of it. You will still feel the uncertainty, still hear the doubt, still face resistance. But you won't be ruled by it. You'll make decisions based on faith, not fear, and every time you do, you step further into who you were created to be. You step out of comfort and into calling. You move from reacting to life to commanding it with spiritual authority. Purpose doesn't always look like a spotlight. Sometimes it looks like quiet faithfulness, like obedience behind the scenes, like trusting when no one else understands. But even in those moments, faith is building something eternal. Because God doesn't measure impact the way the world does. He sees what's done in secret. He honors the unseen yes. And when you choose faith consistently, even in small things, doors begin to open that no man can shut. Your past may have been shaped by fear, by what you ran from, by what you avoided, by what you didn't believe you were worthy of, but your future doesn't have to be. Your future can be shaped by faith, by bold steps, by courageous obedience, by dreams that align with heaven. Faith gives you the power to write a new story, not because of who you are, but because of who He is. There is no greatness without risk. There is no fulfillment without trust. There is no divine purpose that unfolds in the comfort zone. The only way to fully step into what you were born for is to walk by faith, and that means silencing fear every single time it tries to take the lead, not just once, but daily, choosing to believe, to move, to speak, to build, even when it doesn't make sense. Because God didn't call you just to survive, He called you to shine, to lead, to change the atmosphere, to carry His presence into dark places, to leave behind a legacy of faith, not fear. When you believe that really believe it, you stop living small. You stop playing safe. You stop hiding behind your history and start reaching for your destiny.